Hire quick, fire quick is a bit of an outdated term, but the reality is you have to be brutal.
Roei Samuel.
Roei Samuel from Connected.
Roei Samuel, I've got a newsletter out there called Founder and my own podcast, Big Risk Energy.
In this episode, I am speaking with entrepreneur, investor, and podcast host, Roei Samuel. Thank you for joining me.
Really excited to be here.
So you launched what became one of the world's most successful esports platforms.
Still a time when people were going viral every day and people were very, very skeptical. It was like, oh great, what are you going to do? You're going to buy your meal in views, right? We did some big deals with Domino's Pizza, Lucozade, Lynx.
Do you remember the moment getting the money in the bank account?
I was having a cigarette on the balcony of this place and one of my friends was like, this is the most depressed I've seen you. For my approach in investing in companies, I'll look differently if I'm investing at pre-seed, seed, or if I'm part of a syndicate investing in a Series A. At pre-seed level, the way that I'm looking at it is at seed stage, it then flips to, and then when you get to Series A level,
I've never had somebody give me like a framework as an answer, but that's brilliant.
For me, one of the strongest signs of conviction that I can have to invest in a pre-seed company is
the Alfie Whattam podcast.
Roei Samuel, thank you for joining me.
Alfie, thanks so much for having me on, mate. Really excited to be here.
Cool. So you've got a fascinating story, right? I want to start with your first venture. So at age 23, you launched Real Sport, right? You might have had other ventures before this at uni, I've heard, but this is the one that really, the home run, right? So you launched what became one of the world's most successful esports platforms, circa 10 million monthly users.
9 million. I've got to be fair. I've got to be fair. Yeah.
Okay. And you sold it in 2018 for multiple millions to Gfinity. Tell me about that journey, mate, because that's the dream that someone like myself or other entrepreneurs really want to achieve, that level of success. Tell me about building that, and I guess advice that you could give to other entrepreneurs. I'm fishing for myself here, but tell me about that story.
Yeah, 100%. So with Real Sport, I think a lesson that we learned very, very early on is the solution that you have in mind when going to market is never really what you're going to end up getting traction on. Because realistically, you might fall in love with a problem, you might have an inkling as to what the solution could be, but unlikely that that's where you're going to see significant traction. And especially if you're scaling in that way, it's going to really adapt over time. So we started Real Sport really as a podcast initially.
Yes.
I was always a big fan of podcasting. Yeah. It was really before YouTube monetization was significant that way. This was still a time when people were going viral every day and people were very, very skeptical. It was like, oh great, what are you going to do? You're going to buy your meal in views, right? This is still a little while ago. But what we found is if we could partner with the right brands, actually we were better off monetizing through those relationships than relying on ad monetization in that way at that time. And then we found after a little while, so this is probably middle of 2012, what we found after a while is that there were lots and lots of people approaching this, lots of people writing sports blogs. This was just at a time when sports journalism was having a bit of a renaissance on Twitter.
Sure.
And lots of people were just entering online content creation from a more traditional perspective. And they may have had their own blogs online, but they weren't really entering the wider creator community. So we found that there was a massive opportunity to educate people and make that content creation space a bit more accessible as well. So we started building out tools that would allow people to create podcasts, videos, other types of content, originally for sports and then into esports and gaming, as you said, and essentially helping them optimize that content for social. Super standard now, quite bleeding edge back in 2012, 2013. So we got really fortunate with that business, lots of ups and downs along the way, of course, but we did some big deals with some of the biggest sports rights holders in the world, the NBA, the NFL, the Premier League. Did some amazing brand deals with the likes of Domino's Pizza, Lucozade, Lynx, scaled that business to about 9 million monthly active unique users. Super exciting journey, lots of luck along the way, of course.
Yes.
And then, as you said, acquired by Gfinity in 2018, which was
amazing.
Yeah, exactly. So it was a really, really amazing journey on that side, and learned a hell of a lot as well.
Do you remember the moment getting like the money in the bank account from the transaction?
Yeah. So we got really fortunate with the exit that we took all of the cash up front.
Okay,
so
cool.
There was two parts to the deal. There was a cash element and then a shares element. But we managed to get all the shares up front. So yeah, it was really amazing. But one of the interesting things that happened to me, and from speaking to other founders where maybe their startup hasn't worked out, the day after you are no longer the founder and CEO of X
Yes.
is an identity crisis.
Yeah.
It's like, well, who am I today? What do I do next?
Yeah.
And it was really interesting. I loved Gfinity, and there was lots of amazing things. The CEO who acquired us was a guy called Gary Cook. Gary was the CEO of Man City during the takeover from the Mansours.
Okay, wow.
He was on the board of the UFC, on the board of Nike. Like, amazing guy to learn from in that space.
Yeah.
But going from small, scrappy startup, although we were less small at the time we were acquired, to senior management at a PLC, real steep learning curve.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily enjoy publicly listed companies. I think there's a lot of pragmatism, not in necessarily the best way, around quarterly results and the impact on share price.
Sure.
So I knew very quickly that I wasn't going to stay there for a long time. And you're literally going through like, well, who am I? What do I do next?
Yeah.
There was a while I was like, oh, I'm going to go work with guide dogs, or I'm going to be trained to be a fireman. Like, I had no idea what I was going to do next. So it was an interesting learning experience on that side as well.
I had exactly the same conversation with a mutual friend, Nick Tolson, last week, I think, about when he sold Design by Night. Mm-hmm. He said that was his most depressing moment of his life. Is that the sort of thing that you're trying to relate to here? And like, great to get the money, but who am I? What am I doing? You know, why am I here?
100%, and that's it. I remember me and my co-founder threw a party for a few of our friends who had been, supporters along the way. And that night, I was smoking at the time. I was having a cigarette on the balcony of this place, and one of my friends was like, "This is the most depressed I've seen you," on the night that we sold and got the money in. Absolutely relate to that.
Okay.
Hey, this podcast is brought to you by WeLoveAlpha.com. If you're looking to grow and hire and scale your software engineering team in the UK, then go to WeLoveAlpha.com to hire the best software developers on the market. Everything across Java to C# to PHP to Python to React and Angular and mobile and more. Go to WeLoveAlpha.com to hire the best software engineers in the UK now.
You didn't chill out for too long though, because now there's Connected, your newish venture. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So we've Connected. It's a platform and like an ecosystem connecting companies looking to raise and investors, advisors, and that sort of world, right? And I understand as well that you also invest in a bunch of other companies yourself, right? So let's talk about investing for a second. What do you look for? What makes a good investment? What makes a investable founder? What's important to you in that respect?
Yeah, really good question. And I like to think about, from my approach in investing in companies, I'll look differently if I'm investing at pre-seed, seed, or if I'm part of a syndicate investing in a Series A company, for example. At pre-seed level, the way that I'm looking at it is team revenue data. Who are the people? Most importantly, who are the founders? What are they doing? What's their experience? What's their motivation, their grit, etc. Then you might have some early revenue. Unlikely if you do great plus, and your data is irrelevant at that point. Sure. You've got nothing to go on. At seed stage, it then flips to revenue team data.
Okay.
So have they got early signs of traction? Have they showed they can monetize in their space? Have they shown that they're able to make money? Which is now something which has become more important again in startup world, which is great. And then you've got team again, who's executing it, who's going to be scaling the company.
Yeah.
And then data. Data, at that time, I'm now looking at their ability to collect data in an organized way.
Sure.
And then when you get to Series A level, it's data revenue team. The team executing it become the least important part. Still important, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But it's actually the quality and reliability of that data which will enable them to scale at that level. And then obviously revenue as well. So that's how I tend to look at different investments at the three different stages.
I've never heard somebody, I've asked that same question many times on the podcast. I've never had somebody give me like a framework as an answer. That's brilliant.
Great.
That's great. Is that something that you have just developed through trial and error, or did somebody teach you that way of looking at investments? Yeah,
I guess I'm fortunate in that my current activities as a founder is in a platform which brings together founders, investors, and advisors, you say. And after I sold RealSport, I started investing in a lot of founders, and I could see very, very clearly across my whole portfolio, and other investors I was speaking to saying the exact same thing, is the strongest and clearest positive correlation between A, the frequency and quality of investor reporting, and B, the quality of sort of advice and advisors and the source of people they're able to draw in on.
Sure.
and the positive outcomes that they were having. So if they had those two things, they were so much more likely to go on to get further funding, go on to scale as a company, etc. So started to build Connected to make the tools bringing together that ecosystem really accessible and just really provide structure, transparency, and data to the heart of what I considered to be one of the most important indicators of startup success. So through that and the huge exposure that we have to understanding who's performing well, who's raising, who's getting successful outcomes, I have developed a bit of a framework around that.
Second-time founder, as opposed to first-time founder, are very different things. You know a lot more that I don't know. A good way of putting it is you probably forgot more than I have learned to begin with, right? Hopefully that makes sense. But what have you learned as a second-time founder which you would teach, younger version of Roei? What do you wish you could share, knowledge, advice, wisdom to your earlier self?
Yeah, great question, and of course, still learning as much as I can every day, right? It's a lifelong journey to continue to learn. I think we're really fortunate to have amazing conversations like this. We can learn from each other. Yeah. I think the biggest thing that I found as a second-time founder, and I wish I realized this as a first-time founder, is basically everything is downstream from lead gen. If you can generate leads, you can generate revenue. If you can generate revenue, then you can have the time and space required to fix all of the inevitable problems that will occur in your business. People have this idea of like, we're gonna launch, we're gonna get to product market fit. It's like, okay, a handful of companies get to product market fit at that sort of pace. Product market fit is a multi-year, battle between startup or between product and market, where they're hammering away at each other until they find something. And the only way to have multiple goes at hammering your product at the market is to have lead gen. Because without that process, you're never going to get to PMF. So everything is downstream from lead gen, and I think that's probably, if you can nail that, your business will be successful.
I'm really glad that you gave that as an answer. I had this exact same conversation with Harry Stebbings recently, and the point of the conclusion of our talk was that if you want to build a business, do not spend a ton of money building out a product or a platform or on marketing or on sponsorships or whatever. First, find out a way to reliably collect email addresses from people. And you're giving them something, whether that's a blog or a report or a book or a video or a course or a podcast or a tool or whatever, right? A glass of water, right? If that's what your business is and you can give them a sample of that for free in exchange for an email, you've got interested people in theory. You get enough of them and then you've got buyers, right?
100%.
And a business without sales, without revenue, it's not a business.
A lot
of the people on your platform raising a lot of money, they might think that's the goal, right? I've raised a lot of money, I'm a successful entrepreneur. No. Can you actually sell a product, sell a service, and make a margin and scale that through people, through systems, through technology? Are we speaking the same language here?
Yeah, 100%. I think you put that perfectly. And for me, one of the strongest signs of conviction that I can have to invest in a pre-seed company is, what does the wait list look like? This idea of, until we raise, we can't get traction. Your ability to get that wait list together and hack that at the early stage, that's going to be your hustle to show that you can make things happen. So I think that's totally correct. And you're right on the raising thing. Your goal as a business should be to be a profitable business which matches your level of ambition as a founder. Investment might be a right way to get there, but it might not be, and it's certainly not an end. It's a means to an end, and as I said, it might not be the right means to the end, depending on the type of business that you have. I think that's another thing I wish I knew as a first-time founder is the less you can raise, and again, it depends on what you're trying to achieve, but the less you can raise, the better. If you're able to achieve the same goals with less capital and focus more on revenue, it's going to be much better for you as a founder, because then also, and we're in this position with Connected now, when we look at fundraising, we know that we can probably do 30-40% of our funding activities in debt, because we're a really revenue generating company, and therefore dilution is much more minimized than if you're a company just burning tons and tons of cash without really focusing on revenue in that way.
And if you really believe in the business, then why would you want to give part of it away or sell off part of it if you could just raise the money and have to just pay back a loan or something later, right?
100%. And also I think, to your point completely there, the reality of liquidation preferences and preference shares means that taking on venture capital will ensure that you have a very, very different outcome
Yes.
to not taking that type of capital. That outcome could be incredibly positive, but it means that unless it's a home run, you're pretty much going to walk away with nothing as a founder.
Yeah, I've bootstrapped all of my companies, but I completely understand why somebody would raise. It's a different way of doing it. And traditionally, when people raise, or even if they bootstrap and then are able to make money, the next step really is to hire and build a great team and a great culture, because you can only do so much on your own, right? So talk to me a little bit about hiring. You've got a big team now spread all across the world. How do you build a world-class team? What do you look for? How do you build culture? What's important to you when it comes to recruiting?
Yeah, great question. So I think one of the mistakes I made at Real Sport was not relinquishing in tasks completely. I still wanted to understand what's going on in every part of the business.
Me too.
Yeah, exactly right.
Founders hate delegating a lot of the time. They're control freaks, but you have to give it away.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something I've seen with Connected, is just by actually fully trusting my people. And of course, you've got to then hire great people to make it work, but fully trusting people to go and take those tasks off your hands has allowed us to build a much, much bigger business at a much quicker rate than we did with Real Sport. In terms of hiring, I think from a culture perspective, culture at the early stage is essentially what are your values as an individual, right? Because you're hiring against your own values. I would say that for the first 20, 30 hires, certainly the first 20 hires, founder is going to be really, really involved in that hiring process to make sure that culture remains and those values remain consistent. But then it is a challenge. It is a challenge. I think culture then becomes about a lived history rather than a set of values in the wall. Don't get me wrong, we do have the set of values in the wall as well.
Everyone does, man.
Yeah, of course. But being able to point to certain moments where maybe you've been able to support an employee through a really difficult moment, or you've let someone go for the right reasons. These are all the things that build up culture in that way. I think one of the realities of building a startup is you have 3 levels of hiring, or 3 phases of hiring. Initially, you're generalists, people who are just going to put up the bootstraps, get everything done. Moving into specialists, which I think is pretty well known in the startup world. But I think not enough people talk about then the 3rd stage, which is experience. At specialist level, you've got people who are amazing executioners who know exactly what they're doing. They're incredibly talented. But sometimes you then need to bring in that next level, which is, actually, people who have done it on a global scale, people who have managed things at, 50 million ARR rather than 10, that sort of thinking.
Yeah, it's a very, very different type of individual, right? You mentioned around delegating a moment ago. There's only so much that you can delegate though as a founder. There's certain things that you need to do, and if you start giving that task to somebody else, it can go horribly wrong. And I've learned that from first-hand experience. What don't you delegate? What does your day look like, your schedule? What kind of tasks can you not give to people that you have to do?
For me personally, I think fundraising pre-Series B is a totally founder-driven job. And it's a big part of your job.
Yeah, you can't delegate that, can you?
You can't delegate that.
That'd be weird,
Yeah. I mean, once you get to Series B, the founder is no longer running the process in the same way. You might have an intermediary or a bank, depending on what you're going for. But up to Series A, for sure, that's the founder job. And then I think investor relations, again, so important. Often and most of the time, your investors are going to be people who can unlock amazing doors. And for you as a founder to keep on building those relationships, maintain those relationships, and have those doors open for you is really, really powerful. And then I think, again, it's really important for a founder to be as present as they can be. In the office, your job is chief inspiration officer. More than anything, right? Keeping everyone pumped up, keeping everyone hyped. I know it sounds very, very American, but it's true. Having that FaceTime with as much of the team as you can, to a point where it's not detracting from other important tasks. But yeah, it's really important to be present. I think I see founders at too early of a stage sort of disappear. And I think sometimes it happens with technical founders a bit more. Technical founders who go really deep into the product side because they love it. But actually from a CEO founder, you need to have a bit more presence in that way, I think.
I know so many CEOs that they're really doing the job of a CTO. And if they just hired somebody to do the more operational people side, the company would be in a much better position. But
Interesting.
what about when it comes to leadership? Because after we've got a great team, you mentioned a really good point there about being present, being in the office. Someone like Elon Musk is like the extreme example, sleeping on the floor, and that's very inspirational. I mean, you know, I for the right type of person, that would be like great. Let's go for it. But what else is important in a leader? You speak to many entrepreneurs and investors, people that run teams, run companies. What are the successful ones doing differently?
So I think you need to have relentless positivity, optimism, and passion for what you're doing.
Yeah.
You know, you set the tone in that way, and I think the outcomes we've had for Connected, and I see this with other businesses, it's where that passion and that level of drive then radiates down to the rest of the team. Especially as a startup, you know, you're often hiring the first few years young talent, you know, when you are in that generalist and specialist stage. And you know, you have a real opportunity to show them actually how to become leaders themselves, etc. So I think having that level of just passion, optimism is super important. And then I think it is to be as transparent as you can be. Be transparent as you can be. I think there are going to be challenges along the way. There's going to be things that feel really difficult to overcome. But again, it's about building up that undeniable proof, that wall of evidence to say, well, look, we had a really challenging moment before and we got through. Therefore, we have a challenging moment again, we can get through this too. That was definitely one thing which I did not do the first time round with Real Sport, and actually led me and my co-founder to becoming quite isolated within the company at times, or feel isolated within the company at times, because there was a lot going on that just me and him were shouldering. And you know, you think you're doing a good job of the poker face, but your team knows something's up, right? So being able to share with them, take them on that journey, help them, you know, understand all the elements that you're working with, and also a lot of the time get a lot of ideas and solutions from them. With a high quality team, you'll get that. So I think that's a really key part of leadership.
Well, when you're trying to build that high quality team, Roei, it doesn't always work out. Sometimes you do get people that are not the right fit, not the right culture, they're just not giving it what it needs. What's your view? We talked about hiring.
Yes.
Let's talk about firing, right?
Yeah.
How do you let people go? What's your opinion on that side of the coin? Give us your perspective.
Yeah, so I think really good question. I think you have to be brutal in the earlier stage. Hire quick, fire quick is a bit of an outdated term, but the reality is, you know, you've got to be transparent again with all of your employees and say, look, if you're going to join us at this stage, these are the expectations. Are you up for this? Don't pitch someone into being like, no, it's going to be really fun. You know, I mean, it is going to be fun, but you've got to give them a really strong understanding of the size of the task, also the size of the opportunity. And if it's not working, you have to make decisions quickly. It's not fair to anyone else. It's not fair to yourself, to your investors, to your other team members to hold on to people who are not doing what they need to do for your company. And it's not fair to them either. I think one of the biggest challenges a founder will have if their startup is scaling in that way is when you're moving from generalist to specialist. Often people will get lost along the way. So you need to educate your early employees very early on that transition will happen. And although they, you know, will be focusing on 6-7 different things, they should be thinking about what they want to refine into. Where do they see themselves in the startup in a few years' time? And I think when you have that transparency, and as long as you're paying people fairly as well, hate the idea of founders saying, I'm going to pay you shit. Well, can I swear on this podcast?
You can swear as much as you
Okay,
can.
cool. You know, I'm going to pay you shit now, but when we get to Series A, then I'll pay you properly.
Yeah, I hear that all the time.
You hear it all the time, right? The likelihood that the same people are going to be there, who knows, possible, not, you know, impossible to predict these things. So I think as long as you're paying people fairly and you're being transparent about the different stages of that journey and what may or may not happen, I think you can have a clear conscience about it.
Hey, really quick video just to give you a free subscription to Coder magazine. Coder is the #1 publication for all the latest tech news, expert insights, and exclusive industry interviews. With Coder, you get the inside scoop on what's happening with Elon Musk, with Bill Gates, with Jeff Bezos, with Mark Zuckerberg, and so much more. So if you work in the technology industry, then I'd highly recommend that you give Coder a read today. Just scan the QR code on the screen for free access now, or go to welovealpha.com/magazine to get your free subscription today. So you're setting expectations about what people are going to be doing and doing 6-12 months from now before they've even joined the company. So you're not waiting for them to join and then going, all right, let's see if this is going to be a good fit. You're filtering out people before they've even started the interview process.
Yeah, absolutely. At the early stage. Obviously, as you get on a bit later, we're now about 100 employees. You're going to be asking different things if you're involved with hiring and told as a founder. But at the early stage, you're 100% correct. And I think having that level of transparency and trust has been key for our retention metrics. So we've had...
Really high.
Yeah, it's been really high.
96?
Yeah, like 96%. We've had 3 people leave during a whole time in Connected. Now we've let go of...
That's crazy, man. That's so good.
Yeah, it's been really good. We've let 3 people go. Sorry, we've let more people go. 3 people have left. 2 came back, asked to come back. Unfortunately, we sort of replaced at the time. Young guys going to big corporates to get the name on the CV makes a lot of sense. I get it. But I think that transparency is what's allowed us to have a culture where, you know, if you're really working towards the same goal with us and you share the same aspirations and ambitions, you know, you really want to stay.
One thing that you have done, as well as the company, is you have your podcast, Big Risk Energy. Right, just past 50 episodes.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Congrats.
Awesome,
Man. That's cool.
Trying to catch up with you.
Well,
don't think that's going to happen.
You've done like 1 a week, so you're getting. I mean, this momentum, mate. You'll overtake me pretty soon. So that's cool. But what a lot of people don't know is, and you referenced it earlier, this isn't your first podcast, right? So you had Real Talk beforehand, with like Big Nasty and other like interesting individuals. Tell me a little bit about that venture. And you mentioned about that, like Real Sport started as a podcast. That was Real Talk, I imagine.
Exactly.
Yeah, just tell me about that journey, I guess.
Yeah. So I had always wanted to be involved with creative things. I'd always been entrepreneurial, you know, running club nights, doing under 16 nights, the usual thing that we were all doing at that age. But I always wanted to do something creative as well. So we started a podcast called Real Talk. It was me getting drunk and high with really interesting people, ranging from, you know, Big Nasty, Jeezy on the music side of things. We had Sam Bentley, porn stars. We had scientists, politicians, musicians. We had lots of really interesting people on there. It was a lot of fun. But ultimately, we did not really figure out the monetization on that side, and it wasn't the most sponsor-friendly podcast at that time.
I can imagine.
Let's say. But then we pivoted into the sports market. Always a super passionate sports fan, something that I always loved. But I've always tried to maintain creative alongside commercials. I did stand-up for a couple of years, just was selling Real Sport and before starting Connected, which was, you know, loved doing, was a lot of fun, and now happy to reopen a bit of creativity with the Big Risk Energy podcast.
That's cool, man. I'm glad you mentioned stand-up because I did see that you have done some comedy. I know that when you went full in on Connected, you kind of stopped. I saw you commented a couple of years ago on a post saying that it's hard to kind of chase 2 rabbits. You know, you end up catching neither. But what did you learn about stand-up, which can be applied to the world of business?
Well, I think life is sales and marketing.
Yes.
Right, we're constantly marketing ourselves, we're selling who we are as an individual to everyone, in every interaction that we have. And I think stand-up is the most brutal form of validation or non-validation of what you're selling. In that way, it's immediate, it can be very, very tough, can be the most rewarding thing ever. Like when you're killing in a room, it's the best feeling you ever have. What I think is really interesting, and because I hadn't really considered myself in sales prior to doing stand-up, prior to Connected, because actually as a founder, you're selling all the time. You're selling, you know, vision to investors, you're selling equity to investors, you're selling vision to employees, customers, etc. So I hadn't really considered myself sales, although it was. What I realized from stand-up is, you know, you're constantly optimizing, iterating your act, which is your pitch, you're reading rooms, you're understanding, you're seeing what lands, what doesn't, constantly iterating. But I think it's almost like the feeling of really knowing when what you're saying is landing. And I think the ability to bring that into pitches, either investment pitches, customer pitches, hiring, you know, top talent, the ability to understand, okay, what's really resonating with my audience here, what's getting them excited, what works well, what doesn't, is so key to any pitch. And you'll learn the hard way, because bombing in front of a big room is pretty traumatic. But a lot of fun. I would suggest to every single person to try stand-up. Not necessarily because you're funny or good at stand-up, but because the growth experience, the learning and the cold hard look that you'll take at yourself one way or another is super, super valuable.
One of my strangest stories was when I was, I don't know, 5 or 6 maybe even younger than that. I did stand up as a kid, and I won my parents a free holiday.
No way, that's amazing.
There's a video. Actually, in editing, let's play a little clip of that right now, because it was hilarious, right?
It's Alfie!
What do you call a sheep with no legs? Cloud. What do you call a man with a seagull on his head? Quit.
And I didn't stick it out. I did get into the entertainment world. I was a professional magician for like many years.
No way.
Britain's Got Talent and a bunch of other TV shows. Yeah,
That's incredible.
You probably don't even know this, do you, Benny? Yeah, and that taught me about speaking, about presenting, about building connections with people, about bombing and on stage hundreds of times failing something.
Wow.
And just, so I completely get what you're saying. It's very similar to sales. And people have this negative connotation of sales, like, oh, sales, it's my uncle who was like a used car salesman or something, right? But every interaction, you're trying to sell something. If you're a teacher, you're trying to sell the educational material and why they should learn it. If you're, even working in like an accountant, you still need to persuade people why the numbers are correct and give them that evidence, right? So I get what you're saying. Something else that you did, mate, in the past is you started posting on LinkedIn, okay? So you posted your first piece of content 6 years ago. It took me a few hours of scrolling to find this, right?
Okay, I'm so impressed you went through.
Deep research, man. It was an ad for a writer job at Real Sport,
Nice.
right? It got 11 likes, okay? Fast forward to today, you've got tens of thousands of followers, you've got posts that have got hundreds of thousands of likes, comments, engagements, right? You are a LinkedIn celebrity, right? To excuse the cringe in there, right? What advice would you give to people that want to go on that journey of building out their personal brands? They're getting 11 likes like you did, and then they want to get hundreds of thousands. Give us the secrets. How do you do that?
I guess there are two things. One, authenticity.
Yeah.
Right. If you are trying to peddle something that actually you don't know much about, it's not going to land. So, for example, if you're an early stage founder, don't post about what it's like to be on the founder journey as if you've got experience.
Sure.
Build in public. Be totally transparent about what you're learning, what you're doing, but it's got to be authentic.
Document.
100%. We all know these LinkedIn advisors who, and for a while they really took over LinkedIn, but people peddling absolute shit when it was clear they had zero understanding, zero interest, zero experience within what they're talking about. And I think the algorithm took a while to catch up, but now it's very, very clear that if you're going to talk about a subject, you have to have authority on it. The only way to have authority is to have lived experience. So be real about where you are. The other thing is trial and error. There are many things that we did that, we tried on social, on, Real Sports side, from social channels for the company, my own personal channel, that I try loads of different things. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And also have thick skin, right? I think I'm going to add one more. Have thick skin, and also just remove your ego. Because people are scared of being judged. And I understand it, right? It's a very, very evolutionary thing that we have learned that if you stick out, it can be a very, very negative situation for you. If you exit the group, you're hunting for yourself, you're protecting yourself, you're having to eat and feed yourself in that way, you've got no protection. So people are naturally inclined to not want to stick out. But if you are going for it, if you are trying to go on a specific journey, then you have to stick out. So it's about getting over some of your own, existing hold-ups, and don't be afraid to fail. I've had many posts where, especially earlier on, before I had a bit more authority and before people had started to accept my content a bit more, early on, you get a lot of negativity, absolutely. But that's where the stand-up will help. I'm sure doing the magic and bombing a trick will help.
Absolutely,
you get used to it, right?
What about? I like what you said about removing the ego, because your posts are very authentic. You talk about mental health, you talk about ADHD, you talk about areas like that. Tell me a little bit about your experience with those areas, because that's something that a lot of people have challenges with, but they just are scared to speak about it, I often find. Tell me about that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was diagnosed with dyslexia about 7 years old, and ADHD at 13, 14 when I was about to be kicked out of school. I was about to be kicked out of school because I was absolute distraction. I was a bit of a terror. I didn't know I had ADHD, so I just couldn't figure out why, what was normal to me was just not fitting with what the school wanted, right?
Sure.
But it was very clear that it wasn't fitting in. So very thankful to my school. They supported me, to get the right treatment, to get the right analysis and assessments done. To turn out I had ADHD, which is a real light bulb moment for me in understanding, this is why I can't do this. And listen, it's a lifelong journey again on learning. I still learn more and more about ADHD. Every month there's some new research that comes out, learning about different types of ADHD, the types of thinking associated with ADHD, and also lots of interesting theories around what ADHD is. Is it neurological inflammation? Is it chemical imbalance? Is it trauma response? There's so much different literature around it, different science around it. But ultimately, I think it's something which affects a lot of people, and a lot of people are undiagnosed in this. I also think we live in a world that has created attention deficit in all of us. Right?
TikTok, man.
100%. I mean, try and get most people to sit in a room quietly with their thoughts for 3 minutes without their phone.
I love meditation, but it can be so hard. I do it every morning for 20 minutes, but
Amazing.
It's so hard to do sometimes.
But it takes a long time to build to that. And I think one of the things that I found meditation, I think we've both been meditating for quite a few years now, is you actually realize how busy your mind is, right? It's not about, obviously we try to relinquish ourselves from being, having our thoughts controlling us. But just when you sit down in that moment, you realize there are 10 million things in my mind and it just needs a bit of a clear out. But yeah, in terms of the mental health side of things, being on a massive journey on that part, was really depressed for a very long time, was, in a bad way, sort of 6-7 years ago, around the time we were selling Real Sport and the 6-7 months leading up to that, was really, really difficult for me. And then I started the therapy journey, started doing lots of different types of therapy. I found psychedelic-assisted therapy to be really, really beneficial for myself. It's a journey. We all go through it, right? No one has it all figured out. We're all going through this muddle of life, trying to understand our place in it, trying to understand what we're supposed to be doing, dealing with various things from childhood that impact all of us in different ways. It's not, even if you had a not objectively traumatic childhood, there will still be things that we're all dealing with and hang-ups that we're constantly exploring. So I think having transparency around that is something that I wish I had seen when I started my founder journey. Because for sure, the first time round, I was scared to talk about ADHD, scared to talk about the mental health side of things. And now I think everyone talks about it, which is a good thing.
Yeah. I think more than anything though, mate, it's like a great inspiration for people that have these challenges, and then they look at somebody like you and they go, oh fuck, if he can do this, then why can't I, right?
100%. Trust me, if I can do it, anyone can do it for sure. No doubt about that. But yeah, absolutely. And I think that's it. It's just about, I think our jobs on this planet is to try and impact people positively. I think that's it, right? I think, when you really, really boil it down to its core, that's how we can change the world, is impact people positively. So if we have the chance to do that, and have a chance to do as much of that as possible through amplifying voices, like you do on this podcast, and other people do, I think that's what it's all about.
Cool. I can't top that, so we'll end on that note. That's cool. Thank you so much, man, for coming on. If people want to find out more about you and your stuff, I'll put a link below where you're speaking right now. What's the link? What are they clicking on?
So probably Roei Samuel on LinkedIn, or check out the Big Risk Energy podcast as well. Awesome. Alfie, you're a legend. Thank you so much.
Cool. Thank you, my friend.
Nice one.
Cool.
Hey, thanks for watching this podcast. Make sure that you like, subscribe, follow, comment, etc., and I'll see you in the next episode.